Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of COMETSA Tuesdays Live here at COMETSA Television Network, CTN. The mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. Our shows are based on the principle we call idea. We inform, develop, empower, and associate. That's the idea. The COMETSA Tuesdays Live come to you same time on Tuesdays. The first Tuesday of the month, we look at the membership profiling, where we profile one of our members and their businesses and what they do. Second Tuesday, which is today, we talk about authorship and readership. And from next month onwards, we will separate authorship and readership and focus on each one of them. And today you're going to experience that. We're going to talk about authorship only. And then, of course, in the future months, we'll look at readership. The third Tuesday of the month, we look at executive coaching and mentoring from a business perspective and from a competency perspective, where we incubate and develop and induct new entrants into coaching, and of course, talk about the challenges that we are experiencing in the market and the direction where this industry is going. I'm told, colleagues, that coaching is the second fastest growing industry in the world. Currently, the first one is still technology or IT. I guess it involves also the AI and other related fields. And then, of course, the last Tuesday of the month, which is the fourth Tuesday of the month, we look at what we call the African philosophy, the Lekgotla methodology of conversation, facilitation, learning, and development. Actually, I've had discussion this afternoon with some people around how we can apply Lekgotla in business, in companies, to create engagement with the teams and colleagues. Welcome to this special evening. To me, it's special because I have a special guest, the author, somebody who has spent years in industry and thought there is something to share, and that is shared in the form of a book. And then, of course, I'm going to be joined by a friend and colleague and new member, Helen. Helen, welcome back to the country. I must welcome you back to the country and your assignment abroad. And we are glad that you didn't waste so much time. You reconnected with us so that we can take the opportunity to welcome you back to Mzansi. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Sam. Thank you so much for the welcome, and it's good to be back home.
Good to be home always. One of the good evenings, I'm going to make you my main guest. And we're going to talk about all your outside engagements and the lessons that you have acquired out there. I don't want to spoil it now. I want them to look forward to that day. Tonight, you're going to play a very crucial role. We have what we call observer guest, if there's a term like that, which means you're going to be listening to my conversation with my guest, and we're going to ask you at the end of this conversation to give us some reflection from an objective point of view, to let us know if we have inspired you and the guests and the viewers out there, and the messages that my guest will have shared with you. I'm glad that both of you, including myself, we spent some years in corporate, so I hope we'll do justice to this topic that is covered in his book. I normally don't like in introducing my guests because I think it takes away the thunder out of them being our guests. They need to start by telling the viewers who they are. Mbulelo, welcome, my brother. Thank you for joining me, and I need to acknowledge my friend of many years, Juliana Makapan, who brought us together And I'm very glad that today we honored that introduction in a form of a conversation around the topic of authorship. Greetings to you. Say hi to your viewers, and let's start the show.
Good evening, Sam, and also good evening to Helen and also to the viewers, and thank you for having me.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to give you the opportunity just to tell us a little bit about where do you hail from, which part of this world did you originate, and how was it growing up, and did you ever imagine yourself being an author then?
Yeah, well, I was born in Katlehong in the East Rand. I think for some viewers, they might know or might have heard of Katlehong, but it's a township in the East Rand around Germiston, around a town called Germiston. But I grew up in Katlehong, but also I had a stint in the Eastern Cape where I grew up also during my childhood, looking after my grandmother's livestock, cattle and sheep. So there are some years that I spent in the Eastern Cape in a place called Tsolo, in a village called Ngaza, where I looked after my grandmother's livestock. But I also came back later on, back to Katlehong again. And the growing up obviously also took me to KZN, where I did my high school in a place or in an area called KwaDlangezwa, that is next to Mpangeni. There's a town called Mpangeni, where I did my high school and also my junior degree at a university not far from the high school that I was in, which is University of Zululand. It was quite famous those days. I think growing up, I've always had a particular way of looking at life, such that my friends used to say that the way that I behave like an adult, even when we were growing up, because I was always focused, in terms of what I needed or what I wanted from life. And again, I know where that comes from. It comes from my parents, and in particular, my father, who had drilled that in my head that you need to be focused. You need to have a purpose in life. You need to be able to identify as to what you want to be in life, such that even in some instances, in certain settings that I wasn't aware that people were actually watching and observing me, they would comment on the fact that I act in a particular way that says I know what I want in life. And also I am focused, such that on a number of occasions, some people, I remember when I was still at university doing my junior degree, there would be people that would say, including lecturers, and say, you act and talk like a business person. And I had never had exposure to business at that time. And I did not know that I'll end up being an author, but I've always been a person that seeks knowledge, that seeks the truth, that speaks the truth as I say it, and also not afraid to express my views without the intention to harm anyone. But I've always been a person that is not afraid to express his views. And I think probably that's what also got me in trouble later on when I got to be employed, because I wasn't afraid to express my views, but not with the intention of harming anyone or with the intention of being disruptive in terms of whatever environments that I've been. So to answer your question then, I never thought that I would be an author, but I think over the years, I realized that I have a lot to share based on the experiences that I've had in life, growing up to where I am right now, because even the books that I write, they are quite diverse. I don't write maybe just in terms of one genre. In terms of books, I write books, on almost everything about life.
Wow. Well, definitely explore this a little bit deep. We want to know why you write and what you write and for who you write. But I want us to just recap on your professional and career journey. I wouldn't have expected you to write about corporate if you haven't spent time in corporate. Tell us a bit about this.
Yeah. My last job was with CCMA. I used to work at the CCMA when I think I was part of the first group of people that were recruited by the CCMA in 1996 when CCMA started. That was my last job, and I was in different positions, and the last one being a commissioner, obviously. I started in case management and moved from case management to HR, where obviously I was responsible for the capacity building for commissioners, for them to be ready to hear cases. So I used to develop material, the training material for the training of commissioners, and sometimes bring even people from other countries overseas. I remember Denmark and the US, where we would bring experienced arbitrators that would come and do mentoring for commissioners. And also one of the roles that I had was to also go into sessions and to see as to whether the people that we are training to be commissioners were ready to actually hear cases. And I would be able to write reports and say, this one still needs, some mentoring there and there, or perhaps further development in terms of particular areas. So later on, when I then moved to being a commissioner, it was easy for me because it is something that I had been doing in terms of capacity building for commissioners. But in 1999, while still with CCMA, but I didn't start with the CCMA. There are other organizations that I've worked for. I started my career as a teacher at high school. I used to teach matric students at high school, and even now, when I meet some of them, they still call me Menier. And sometimes I forget that I was a Menier. The person will be shouting, Menier, Menier, but it doesn't ring a bell.
Once Menier, always Menier.
Exactly, until that Menier is persistent. And then I remember, by the way, I used to be Menier. Let me turn around and see as to who is saying Menier. And so I used to be a teacher at high school. And even then, even now, the adults that I taught at that time, they always remark at my personality as a teacher, because it has always been a focused teacher and a no-nonsense teacher. And those days, there was still corporal punishment. So we still use corporal punishment.
It's quite very interesting, Mbulelo, that you made that transition from teaching into corporate.
Yes.
It is quite seldom, am I right?
No, you're right. But I think I've always been ambitious. I knew that I wasn't going to last in teaching, even though I actually liked teaching. But the ambition that I had wasn't a teaching ambition. It was more, corporate, like, getting success in terms of doing bigger things than teaching, such that in some instances, I became very frustrated, even though I think I was a good teacher because I actually produced quite good results at metric in terms of the subjects that I was teaching. But I don't think I belonged to teaching, even though I know that teaching got me again when I qualified and had my postgraduate qualifications. And then there's a gentleman called Joe that called me to UNISA to come and assist them in terms of assisting students. So that has never really left me, because even in terms of the corporate environment, I also went, for instance, from being case management, if you look at CCMA, to HR, where I also was responsible for training and development. So it never really left me. So when I became then a consultant later on, again, I used the skills that I had in terms of, the training programs that I would develop and then go to corporates and actually run for corporate. So I don't think it's a skill that I have lost since I left teaching, even though obviously it's at another level now. It's no longer teaching kids, at high school level. It is capacity building in terms of, for instance, employees within organizations. But to answer your question, it is rare for people to move from teaching and get into corporate, even though it does happen. There are people that I've seen, that I know, that have moved from teaching, and they are bigger things now in corporates.
Beautiful. Let's acknowledge Juliana. You saw I flighted her message there that she's in the background listening to us. Thank you very much, Juliana, for tuning in. I really appreciate you bringing us into contact with Mbulelo. And let me also apologize to our viewers. We planned to have both Mbulelo and Mr. Tep in the studio, but Mr. Tep will be with us in the August edition of this show. So we will definitely still bring him on board, and we will spend time with him as well as we are spending time with Mbulelo Mayikana. Is that the right way of pronouncing it? And you say you grew up in East Rand, but you have some roots in the Eastern Cape.
Yes. That's a correct way of pronouncing it.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And I'm glad that you touched on your character and personality and the fact that it showed up very early in your life. And it looks like you have consistently kept it, and that's why it is delivered what it has delivered today. Because I'm going to link that to the title of your book, because it's a very hot title. Now that you shared with us your background, that you've been involved in CCMA, it actually started to connect Helen for me, that he will come up with this kind of a title. I don't know about you. The moment he mentioned the commissioner and the CCMA, I said, now
absolutely. Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because people will always ask, why will somebody come up with a title like this, Helen? And then people start questioning not questioning, but checking on the personality and the background, and say, now it makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, good. So I really, that was a nice intro, but why I bring also the fact, your connection to the Eastern Cape. South Africa is quite a very interesting country, and we must always remind ourselves that the dynamism of South African society, when you meet somebody here, where in the South or wherever you are, if you're not going to ask which outlying region they are linked to, then you don't really know the story of South Africa. I come from the deep rural Skukune.
Yeah.
And I know Helen is going to tell me that he's not coming from those regions, but if you look deeper, you will find that the elders somewhere come from somewhere. Am I right, Helen?
Absolutely. I don't come from the rural areas, but my parents come from, Marapiani in the northwest, where they grew up. So absolutely.
There you are. There you are. Yeah. So how did all these things, Helen? I wondered. I'm gonna keep on bring you in, because we can't just not do that. Some of the topics we are touching relate to you as an observer guest. Use the opportunity. Mbulelo, how do the experiences like these ones influence one to develop a desire to start writing? Or is it you are one in hundreds that just happen to? Because I think I'm writing books as well, and I relate it to my upbringing, where I come from. I said, I had to write about this. Did the same happen with you?
Yeah. Well, with me, I think the environments that one has been into have been an influence in terms of igniting the desire to write books. Now, these environments could be in terms of workplaces that I've been into, or it could be also social environments that one has been into and the observing some of the things that are happening in terms of the society. Because some of my books that I write based on things that are happening in the society, with the intention of seeing as to whether what sort of value can I add in terms of, helping people with some of whatever challenges that they might be having. So mine hasn't been really about my background in terms of where I come from. Every book that I've written up to now, I've written about 24 books.
Wow.
Every book that I've written has always been influenced by, my observance in terms of environments that I find myself. And whenever I see a challenge or see challenges, that then ignites that desire to then say, I could possibly provide answers to some of the challenges that I'm observing in terms of those environments. It could be whether in terms of relationships, it could be in terms of workplaces, it could be in terms of maybe politics, because I also do delve into political writing, where I write things in terms of what I see in terms of our country. So my influence most of the time has always been the environments that I find myself into, and also things that I observe and maybe I become concerned about. And even the book that we're going to be talking about, it is also a book that is influenced by the environments that I've been into. And you've mentioned CCMA. Yes, it started there at CCMA, but it moved on to the consulting environments that I've been to in the past 26 years. Things that I observed and things that I experience as a consultant to say, but this is not what is supposed to be happening.
We will very soon jump onto the book, but I want to just explore this journey of authorship. Once it started, did you focus on a particular style, or did the style of writing just evolve? And of course, also, were you concerned with ability to write, or you just started writing as we are always advised, just write?
Yeah. Now, I think for me, it was just writing, But, and again, I never told myself that this is a particular style that I'm going to follow. I've always been a conversationalist. In other words, a person that likes to create or to start conversations about something. So I think it was just natural, because people that have read my books, they say, you are not a theorist, you are a conversationalist. When I read your book, it's as if we're having a conversation, or you're having a conversation with me. So the style that, for instance, that I use, and it was not a style, like I said earlier on, that I deliberately chose and said, this is going to be my style of writing. It was more like, how do I have a conversation with you through this book? How do I make sure that this book is not a theoretical book where you have to go to Google, or you have to go get a dictionary and get to, find as to what certain words mean in the book, and also maybe some technical terms that are also used in the book, so that you then need to find out as to what does this technical term mean. I write all my books, and right from the beginning, when I started writing the very first book that I wrote, it was more, like I said, triggered by what I was seeing in terms of the environment. But the way that I was writing it, it was more of a conversation that I wanted to have with the reader, to say, as a reader, let's have a conversation around this, such that all my books, when you see them, you will find that each chapter ends with a reflections page, where you as a reader, you are encouraged to reflect, on what you have read, and then give your own input or your own understanding in terms of what you just read.
So it's almost like it could become a manual for conversation,
Yes, exactly. I think most of the people have said, one of the compliments that I've received from people is say, apart from the content of the book itself, we actually like the fact that you give us an opportunity to journal. That's the language that they use. They'd say you allow us to journal, where we can be able to put our own experiences in terms of what we have read on each chapter, where we perhaps are able to say we either have experienced something similar to this, or what there are certain questions that I have in terms of what I've just read, or I agree with what I've just read, or I disagree with what I've just read. So the intention is to have a conversation, but we're having a conversation through the book. Every book, it doesn't matter which book that I've written, all of my books will have, at the end of each chapter, a section where you can be able to put your own reflection in terms of what you just read.
Wow. There it is. Wow. Workplace pitbulls, and disrespectful workplaces. Just talk to us about the title. What brought it up?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I have been in consulting for over 26 years. And obviously, like I said earlier on, I've been a commissioner at the CCMA. And when I was looking at writing certain things around, leadership, culture, environments that employees find themselves, including managers, by the way, it's not just employees, general employees. I then said, what would be the correct depiction of what I want to write about? And because I grew up in rural areas, and I am also an animal lover and nature, I love nature, I then said, in nature and perhaps in terms of animal world, what best describes what I want to talk about? I then realized that everything that I wanted to write about had to do with an animal that I realized embodies what I wanted to write about, a pit bull. But a pit bull in relation to what happens in the workplace. And again, I looked at the character of a pit bull. What kind of an animal is a pit bull? Whether perhaps the pit bull embodies the things that I have seen. A pit bull, for instance, is a very tenacious animal, and it instills fear. It is an animal that, if not well looked after, can become very dangerous to a point where it can inflict, serious harm, and in some instances even cause death. And this is a kind of animal that has got immense strength, that when it attacks, it has a tunnel vision. It doesn't see anything else, except what it is attacking, to a point wherein it doesn't matter whether you can pour water, you can beat it, but when it's in that frenzy, it has a tunnel vision. It just focuses on that which it is attacking. And I think that tenacity for me started reflecting things that I've seen in terms of the workplace. And I continue to see in terms of workplace, in terms of how some people within workplaces actually behave. And I then said that, okay, then this is the correct title that depicts, what I normally see, the tenacity, the tunnel vision, the harm that is inflicted by pit bulls within workplaces. And that harm makes the workplaces disrespectful workplaces, because workplaces are not supposed to be like that. Workplaces are supposed to be places wherein people go in and come out with zero harm, both psychologically and also physically.
And if you look at the word pit bulls, people will quickly say that will be associated with male people that you're writing about there in the corporate.
Well, that would be a wrong assumption because pit bulls are both male and females, and also it is both employees and managers, because you have pit bull employees, you also have pit bull managers, you have male pit bulls within workplaces, and you also have female pit bulls. I, for instance, when I used to be full-time employed, I personally experienced a female pit bull. Not a male pit bull. So it is not. It would be. It's not written to focus at males. It focuses everyone within the organization. I mean, the people that have read the book, they have commended the fact that I have been very balanced in terms of looking at the workplace in relation to what I call workplace pit bulls and disrespectful workplaces, because I have not focused maybe at a particular level within the organization. I have not focused also at a particular gender, but I think one of the people that review it, someone said everyone gets to be held accountable in terms of the book, in terms of the book.
So are you lamenting the fact that there is these characters at the workplaces, or are you advising the reader how to deal with these characters, or is it both?
I think there have been books that have been written around people, how to what to do when they are being pit-bulled, within the workplace. I decided to take a different route in terms of writing the book, where I was looking at the workplace itself. What is it supposed to be for employees? And also, who are the custodians of an environment that is conducive to employees not experiencing pit bulls? And also, what enables a pit bull culture within an organization? And what is the role that is played by those that have got stewardship over workplaces to ensure that pit bullying does not take place? And I also looked as to in how does pit bullying manifest, and also what is it that causes pit bullying? Okay. Yes, at the end, I think in just one chapter, I do advise people as to how to deal with pit bullying within the workplace, especially those that become victims. But the focus is more to be all-encompassing, to look at all aspects that breed pit bullying within workplaces, and also look as to how it manifests and also what causes it, because I think that is very important in terms of being able to remove it. We need to be able to determine as to what is it that causes it in terms of the culture that exists within the organization, and also why are those that have got stewardship over organizations unable to actually remove pit bullying, or why do they collude with pit bullying within the environments that they are entrusted with?
Yeah, you did hint at the fact that this is what you have experienced or you have observed, and you continue to observe even today. That is concerning.
It is concerning. I don't think, not all workplaces have got same levels of pit bullying, but you would find that in most organizations there is pit bullying. And if I can just say, Sam, that one of the things that I have found is an enabler in terms of pit bullying is the fact that we sometimes find organizations that would put the guiding principles that they've developed aside, and you would then find that there's incongruence between the daily culture that you find within the organization with what they are saying is their espoused culture as an organization. I mean, I just gave you an example. If the organization says this is what we stand for, including maybe pronouncing on their values and saying these are our values, But when you then get into the organization and you find that there is disjuncture between that which they say they are and what they do on a regular basis. And sometimes that happens or emanates because sometimes these organizations, they see that a performance culture that is linked to us getting targets is different from the one that we have pronounced on and said, this is who we are. I'll give you an example, Sam, just a quick one. I found some of my clients are mining companies. You would find that when you go to companies like, for instance, in mining, they would say, these are our values. And out of maybe 5 or 6 values, the one value that would be the most implemented value, the others are not implemented, is safety, because it's linked to the licenses that they have to mine. Because once there is a fatality or an injury, then the DMRE stops mining. So in other words, they will pay least service in terms of other values and just focus on one. And in some instances, you would find that they would have maybe even a value that says respect, but there's disrespect all over the place in terms of how people interact with one another. And I'm not talking just general employees, from the top person within the organization to the lowest person within the organization. So you do have that, where you find that pit bullying within organization is enabled by a particular culture that you have. And there are 3 things that, for instance, I've found. A culture where there's omni-importance, where you have people that believe that they're very important. And therefore, if you have values and guiding principles, those things do not apply to them. They apply to everyone else. They are exempted from that. They can do as they please. So that omni-importance. And that leads, unfortunately, to what one can call cultural numbness, where people become numb to their espoused values and culture that they said they want to have. And then you find that people go along with whatever that is happening.
Yeah. It's unbelievable how culture can actually be based on the leader or the leaders or a group of leaders who in many cases may happen to be having the same type of culture or same type way of looking at things, and become a concrete monoculture that everybody else has to live with it, because their weight is final, and they give the direction to the culture, the entire culture of the organization. So my question is, in that situation, it's almost like a hopeless situation if it is actually sitting with the leader themselves. Therefore, a book like this will almost not even be opened. How do you envisage this book penetrating those kind of environments and making impact? Or are you saying that if it can just reach the employees and they get it and read it quietly in their safe space and then learn how to survive with it? Or what did you do with those companies which became open to engage with you? I'm asking too many questions at a time because I really see so many multiple ways of looking at it. And I'm curious to know, how does it reach those places that are disrespectful and full of pit bulls?
Well, it's a two-pronged approach. Obviously, you've mentioned one where, for instance, you have employees that read the book. The book then gives them guidelines in terms of what they can do to actually rescue themselves from the attacking pit bulls. Okay. But the other approach is to appeal to the ethical nature of human beings, to then say, if you are in leadership and you are in management positions, you are given stewardship over the organization that you are actually working for. And in terms of what you're supposed to be doing, you're supposed to be ensuring that people go home unharmed, both psychologically and also physically. Doesn't matter what organization you work with. It could be also in terms of maybe government departments and state-owned entities, because I do talk about that also in terms of the book. I have, I mean, what we see right now, I'm going to come back to your question, Sam. What we see happening in terms of Madlanga Commission, it is exactly what I've written about in terms of the workplace pitbulls, because there are people that have given them, that title of being omnipotent, that they could do as they please, and the rest of the organization becomes numb to what they do and who they are and what they want to do. And in some instances, there are people that would even justify what they do. So to answer your question, therefore, this book, what I have realized that people in HR have said to me, we want this book, but we're going to actually present it in the circles within the organization as a book that we are having for developmental purposes, because there are pitbulls that are gatekeepers and probably would not want to have the book, to be read by everyone within the organization, because it talks about what they do. Yeah, I mean, one of the persons said, I will not look at the same people in my organization the same way again, because I already see the people through this book as to who these people are within my organization. But
from that perspective, sorry for disrupting that.
That's fine.
I said from that perspective, that's great, because and hence my question of what impact at what level and how.
Yes.
I'm glad that you are saying that it's enough just for people to be able to, having read the book, to identify those that could be classified under this without necessarily labeling them.
Yes.
Because for various reasons.
Yeah. It is important that the people are able to look at not just the individual, but they need to be looking at what is the enabling culture that exists in our organization that makes us to have pitbulls. Because pitbulls will never happen unless the culture is enabling them.
Hence the question from our fellow author here, Leonard. I wanted to bring that in. Leonard Mavuso is a fellow author. I'm sure you know each other. Leonard, thank you very much for your input. I still want you to come in the studio to present your book. He's also a seasoned HR person. I like it when HR people come. How does culture impact it?
Well, pitbulling is always linked to culture. It always is linked to culture. One of the things that, to answer Leonard's question, and I'm going to make an example, there are instances where you would find that the top leadership within the organization doesn't dirty themselves or dirty their hands and actually become active pitbull themselves. You would then find that by neglect, however, from their side, a pitbull culture emerges. It emerges because of certain individuals that they believe are stars in terms of the performance within the organization, and therefore they cannot actually bring them to order. There are people, for instance, that get into organizations and they become these technical experts, and organizations depend on them in terms of maybe achieving certain targets and all this stuff. So by neglect, therefore, from top leadership, because they're interested in the results, because the top leadership will tell you that, no, we do need results. The board has given us these targets. We need to meet these targets. And in some instances, how they get to those targets, it doesn't become important to them, just as long as they get the targets, because they are measured in terms of the tangible targets. I mean, this is happening all over. This happens all over. So then you find the top leadership within the organization neglect then to look at culture and make sure that even though yes, we like the fact that you are technically competent, you are assisting us in terms of the delivering of numbers, but you need to also behave accordingly in terms of what you want. So to answer your question and then Leonard's question, culture is an enabler of pit bullying. And culture happens because it is being led, pit bullying culture, because it is being led by the leadership within the organization, or there is neglect from the part of leadership, and deliberate neglect. I'm not talking about incidental, coincident. I'm talking about deliberate neglect, where they're going to say, we can't afford to lose Mbulelo, even though he doesn't behave accordingly. He is bullying everyone. He is our star performer, and therefore we have to see as to how we continue to have him on board. And HR maybe can talk to Mbulelo, but Mbulelo continues to do what he wants to do, even when HR has spoken, to Mbulelo. But leadership doesn't do anything because it is afraid of what the consequences will be in terms of losing this maybe so-called star performer or star performers.
I think you hinted to a particular environment. In this case, I would say a sector. It does look like there are certain sectors that are very much reputable for allowing the certain type of leadership style. In this case, the roughness of the sector itself could invite that. Am I right?
Yes and no. Yes and no, because there are sectors that one has been into, and the sector itself is a very professional sector. It is not based on the actual numbers. I mean, if you look at government departments, state-owned enterprises, for instance, those are environments where you would not say there are hard targets that need to be met probably on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and all this stuff. They're service-oriented organizations. But you find the toughest and the most dangerous pit bulls in those environments, So yes, in terms of certain sectors, because of the pressure that they have in terms of producing certain numbers, you will then find the pit bulls. But these workplace pit bulls are not necessarily confined to those sectors like mining, manufacturing, construction. No, you do have pit bulls also in terms of other sectors where you find, and I want to repeat again, what we're seeing at Madlanga Commission is a typical example in terms of the fact that you will find workplace pit bulls all over.
How do we build a case for intervention to Mbulelo? Coming from a consultancy background, for this to be addressed, I'm just thinking it's a hard sell, especially if HR is left alone to engage on this topic, and yet the candidates or participants will be the people in the cold face.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I personally, in the book, when you read the book, there is a chapter where I talk about HR. HR either becomes complicit to the pit bullying that happens in workplaces, or becomes a helpless structure against pit bullying. Now, HR becomes complicit in the sense that some HR professionals, they sometimes are unable to see as to whether are we part of management, are we part of employees, or are we in the middle where we're looking after the interest of everyone within the organization. And some of them are actually even afraid to actually correct their colleagues because sometimes they think that I might be worked out of the organization. So to answer your question, therefore, this book for me, it is for instance, organizations that have bought it. They've said we are just going to distribute it amongst the leadership team and the management team, and we will then call you to come and we will have workshops around the book. So in other words, they do not already say we're going to ask for the CEO and see if the CEO agrees with having the book, because they are afraid of a situation wherein a CEO can already look at the book and see and say, there are certain people within the organization that might not like what this book is all about because of what they do, and therefore let's not open the door to it. So the HR, what they do is they just purchase the book and then they send it to everyone who's in leadership and management. And because a number of people, sometimes they've got blind spots, the hope that sometimes I have is that by reading the book, because you have blind spots and you don't see yourself as to how you behave, when you read the book, you then say, this book is talking exactly about what I do. So without an intervention from an HR professional, you already start looking at yourself and say, I need to do better. So what these HR professionals have been doing in terms of just buying the book and then distributing it amongst their leaders and managers has been working in that sense then to then say, if people self-correct, that is one of the things that HR is supposed to be looking at. That rather than a situation where you then is going to say you are a bad person and you start wagging your finger and all the stuff at people and saying, this is what this book talks to you. Let people read the book, and based on what they say, they then look at and say, okay, this is bad. Because the book tells you, if you are a pit bull, how you're supposed to be looking at what you're doing, and also how you can remedy what you are doing.
I want to commend you on having decided to write this book, and in fact invite many more people out there that have experienced the workplace challenges or other kind of challenges, that this is the best start, because somebody that has seen it needs to write about it. And I think that brings me to the actual topic of authorship, to say you sat down and obviously you had to plan, structure it, and then manage the writing project itself. Let's get to that side, so that so many people out there that are having this kind of issues in the workplace that they want to bring out. I mean, this is a gift to the consulting world, and this is a gift to employment places as well. But I think we must not underestimate the amount of effort that you brought in putting together a book like this. There must be methodological way of writing a book like this, because you can't be careless about it. So, so share with us how you went about planning it, how you structured it, and how did you manage the project of writing it? It must have been very exhausting as well.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, Sam, this book took me, I think, about 5 years to write. Wow. Because I would write and stop. Write and stop until I finished it this year. Okay. Remember what I said in terms of how I chose the title of the book. In terms of writing the book, one of the things that I have looked at was, firstly, how do I use this metaphor and make sure that it works in the writing of the book, such that some people, instead of looking at the content, they might say you're calling people dogs, whereas that's not really, it's a metaphor. Okay.
Yeah.
I then looked at as to what is it that is going to bring this to life, such that when a person reads the book right from the beginning, not in the middle, but right at the beginning, the person can understand that this is a metaphor that is meant to lead to a particular learning that you need to have. And this is why right at the beginning, I then said, I need to explain what a pit bull is and its character. And what it does, what it's capable of, and also why it is a dangerous breed if it's not well looked after and trained well and also catered for well. After looking at that, I said, if I have that chapter right at the beginning, and then I can be able to then say, this book is using people as a metaphor in terms of what one finds or what has seen in terms of the workplaces, then I felt that it would then ease people into the content in terms of saying, okay, now that we've seen the character of what a pit bull is and what it does and its tenacity its tunnel vision and what it's capable of doing, but how does that relate to the workplace? Then I describe from the introduction in terms of workplaces that one of the things that is important that we need to understand, I like what you said earlier on, that this is a gift to the consulting world, because there is a lady that is a consultant that ordered quite a lot of these books for her consulting business. One of the things that we should never forget, adult human beings spend 70% of their adult period in workplaces than the 30% that they actually spend with their loved ones, meaning that they spend a lot of time. The workplaces are supposed to be environments that are conducive for people to actually to be in, so that when they go back home, for that 30% that remains in terms of their lives, they go back sane and also safe, both psychologically and physically. Now, workplaces, if you look at what I've written about in terms of workplace pitbulls, unfortunately, they are responsible for a lot of harm in terms of what happens also, not just in the workplace, but also in terms of people's lives. So I had to then structure that so that people, I appeal to the reader that this book that you're going to read is talking about the fact that you're supposed to create an environment, because people spend 70% of their adult life in the workplace until they retire, than in their workplace. You need to create an environment that is
I think that is a very powerful selling point.
Yes.
Creating a case for it, because when people are coming to a place that is so toxic, it can only manifest itself in the form of being unwell at work or in general in life. There is a point that is brought forward again by our brother Leonard here to say, what is the role of organized labor in enabling the culture of food bullying? I don't know whether you need him to expatiate on that.
Not really, because part of what I do in some organizations, I do what we call relationship building by objectives between labor and management. So I do facilitate those sessions where I also mediate between labor and management. Labor can either be pit bulls themselves, in the workplace. Labor can be pit bulls themselves in terms of the workplace, or they could be a buffer between pit bulls and the victims of pit bulls. Okay, because some labor, especially in organizations where you would find that you have full-time shop stewards and perhaps highly visible labor leadership, they become a buffer, because they, those that are potential pit bulls, they know that they are likely to be challenged by labor, in terms of what they do. And because labor has got, for instance, that monopoly or power to stop, any work that is being done, work stoppages and all that stuff. So labor can either be a buffer, or they can be pit bulls themselves in terms of sometimes becoming a hurdle in terms of workplaces, delivering on the objectives that they have. But one understands as to why they would actually do that. I'm not excusing it, but I understand, as someone that has worked at the CCMA, I understand exactly as to why they become pit bulls. They become pit bulls because of things that they actually say. But some of them, especially those that become shop stewards, they want re-election as full-time shop stewards. And therefore, they become very unreasonable pit bulls when it comes to the functioning of the workplace. So that's how I can actually respond in a short response to Leonard in terms of labor. They either become a buffer and protect those are likely to be victims of pit bulls, or in some instances, they themselves can be pit bulls.
Wow. Saying that we're talking about authorship as a profession, or as some could be a hobby, but I think in the context of what we are discussing now, that's a serious business. So writing a book, conceptualizing and writing a book is one thing, but getting the book out and the book be made available and royalties being earned is another dynamic. How do you manage the publishing side of your books?
One of the things that I'm a strong believer of, or in the views that I have about certain subjects that I write about. One of the things that I do not want to have as an author is a company or even someone that is going to say, no, don't say this, don't put it differently than how you want to put it. So I then decided right from the beginning that I was going to self-publish my books. I wasn't going to have a publisher because I wanted to have autonomy in terms of what I write about. You know, to use Steve Biko's expression, I write what I like. So, so it's important for me to be able to have full autonomy in terms of writing my books. Yes, they go for editing. Yes, they go for reviews, you know, by individuals where people will give me feedback in terms of how they found the book. And I would even put the reviews that they have as they are inside the book so that you can be able to see as to what people are saying. I don't take only the positive reviews, only even where someone says, no, I didn't like that or I did not agree with that. I already put that review inside the book. So to answer your question, I self-publish all my books. And in terms of everything that has got to do, including printing and having the book out there in the public, I actually do that myself.
Wow. And the distribution?
Yeah, distribution again is the same thing. I actually have people that help me with distribution. For instance, if you look at this one, I decided that I wasn't going to have it for now at Exclusive Books. Some of my books are available. I actually sell them through Exclusive Books. But in terms of the printing and the actual distribution, I do it myself to all the stores where my books are available.
Wow, that's interesting. That's a good way to look at it, Mbulelo. Do you want to share with us the names of some of the prominent people that have made some written some reviews about your book, and what did you learn from those reviews?
Well, so many. Okay, let me just a few. There's so many. Professor Bonang Mohale is one of them. Professor Mohale looked at the book. It's a long review. I can't repeat it here. It's in the book itself. I've included in the book. And I think for him, he will use the angle from the respect side that the book is assisting people to understand that in terms of the environments that people work in and the environments where you meet people that you work with, irrespective of your level or hierarchy within the organization, respect is something that is supposed to be consistent. So he then looked at it from that side, which obviously is important because the sub aspect in terms of the topic of the book looks at disrespectful workplaces. Then there is Professor Tumi Diale, who is a dean at Sol Plaatje University, who also gave a glowing review, and the review is also in the book. And the angle that she actually used was the simplicity in terms of the language that has been used in writing the book and being able to address a very sensitive aspect in terms of workplaces in a manner that is well balanced, but at the same time using simple language without being theoretical and going to psychology books and putting information as to what psychology books are saying. Also, we have also Dr. Mkhize, who is at UJ, who also gave a glowing review around the book in terms of her saying the book, again, is well balanced in terms of looking at pitbullying within workplaces, and the fact that it's a good book for people to do an introspection in terms of how do they come across in terms of people that they work with, especially those that are in management and leadership positions. And also, I think I have about 10 reviews, if I'm not mistaken, but I want to end with Professor Andrew, who is one of the leaders at ESCOM, who said that the title of the book is exactly what it's supposed to be in terms of describing what is happening within the workplaces. And the fact that he would not have titled the book differently than the title that has been given, because it precisely depicts what is happening within workplaces, and also the content itself. It is so balanced such that there isn't one, level of workplace people that would say it is being attacked, because it is all encompassing in terms of what it looks at. So those are there's also another HR director that also mentioned that she can already see within the organizations that she has been working for, people that are described in the book that I've written. So there are a number of reviews that are there, but for those people that would like to have the book, they will find the reviews at the beginning of the book, so that they get to see as to what the people that were reviewing the book said.
Beautiful. It's time to bring Helen in with her reflection and any additional questions she might have for you. But the last point from Leonard is how do we use reviews post-publishing? I think that's quite a very practical question for many of us who are authors and emerging authors.
Well, what I normally do is when I'm because the book is currently being sold to corporates, I actually put the reviews in one flyer, one flyer, when I then send, the information about the book and say, these are the reviews in terms of the book. And the reviews are actually very critical in terms of selling your book and also getting reception of your book, especially if the people that did the review are people that are respected people, and also are people, especially because for me, and it was not intentional that I used 3 professors to actually review the book. And people can say that the book meets certain standards in terms of what you are likely to read. When you then see a review by a professor or by a doctor or maybe by an HR director, you then, because 3 HR directors reviewed the book and all of them were saying almost the same thing. So when you see those reviews and you are a person that wants to read the book, you are attracted by those reviews before you even read the book. So if you are an author, someone that wants to write a book, you need to write a book and have it reviewed by people that you believe that their views are going to matter to a potential buyer and a potential reader of your book.
Beautiful. We'll come back to you at the end and give you the opportunity to share with the viewers how they can get hold of the book and how they can get hold of you as well. Helen, this is mouthful, yeah? Something valuable for corporate, but let's hear from you.
Yes, I think you've given me a really tough task, Abutiseme, but I'll do my best. Firstly, congratulations, Mbulelo, on writing on such a courageous topic. I was battling with, I have a fear of missing out. So I thought, maybe I should start reading this book before I get to this session. But I'm glad I did not, because I have such a better understanding of what was driving you to write this and what to expect in the book. I think what came through for me is really your kind of your, you know, how your rich and diverse background, your upbringing, and kind of the nature of a young person that you are, how it has contributed to you having this hunger for writing. You know, to have written 24 books is not a small feat, right? And I was also quite touched by, you know, the purpose and the calling that was calling you to write these books, right? You talk about wanting to help people, wanting to bring a different perspective on the table, and perhaps, you know, it appeals to someone, perhaps it helps someone. So that was interesting for me to also hear about. I loved hearing, and that's why I'm very happy that I did not read the book ahead of time. But I loved hearing about the nature of the pit bull. I mean, we all know the pit bull to be as tenacious and vicious, and how much harm it can create, right? But I loved hearing about how you personified it. You know, in terms of saying both men and women can be pit bulls, both leaders and employees can be pit bulls as well. As an HR person of, you know, many years, I also loved hearing you talk about how misaligned, you know, company values can be from the company culture. And that can be something that is driven by leaders. And I have seen that so many times in my career, as to just how damaging it can be when the leaders are not, you know, walking the talk, right? When they preach one thing but do the other thing. And it reminded me of a quote, you know, that says, you know, the weakness of a leader enables the same kind of weakness in others who they lead. And pit bullying for me is a classic example of how, you know, this weakness in a leader can actually be multiplied in a culture if it's not addressed. You know, once again, I think as an HR person, I was quite touched by, yes, this is a great book. This is a topic that is worth talking about. And this is one of the toughest topics to talk about. But, you know, it's one thing to talk about how it manifests and, you know, how to you know, how it manifests in an environment. But how do you help HR to do it? Because, you know, this is not an easy topic. And, you know, a few times in my career, I've had to deal with you know, similar type of situations. You need to be a really seasoned and strategic HR leader that is positioned in a, you know, in a certain type of way for you to have a courage to open up this kind of topic and have conversations. And what became very clear to me is that this is also not something that, you know, you can just give people a book and say, go and read. You need to find a way to get them together and have the conversation. And I'm really, really interested to hear just, you know, if this is covered in the book, you know, of those who've had the conversation, how did they take the conversations from there? But I also loved how you talked about the pit bull themselves. You know, in my career, I've noticed that sometimes the perpetrators are not aware that they are perpetrators themselves. And you talked about even the pit bull can be able to see themselves as they read the book. And you've given them some pointers of, firstly, this is the impact you're having on people. This is kind of the damage you're having on the culture. And you've given them tips of how to address that and how to start to transform, because it's a journey, right? To go from being a pit bull in any capacity, whether you are a leader or whether you're a shop steward or whether you are an employee that has some kind of level of power, right? So it's a journey to go from being a pit bull to being a transformed person. I also loved, and I look forward to reading the book for this reason. The comment you said you've heard about the book where people are saying they loved just, they felt as they were reading the book that they were having a conversation with you. It wasn't too heavy. It wasn't too kind of academic, right? It was relatable. I know that of the books that I have read that I've loved, it has been about, I feel like I'm having a conversation with this author, and I'm sitting next to them, and I want to keep hearing more and more because we are having a conversation. So I loved hearing that, and I'm looking forward to reading the book from that perspective. I also loved how you talked about at the end, or maybe at the end of a chapter, or at the end, you give them kind of some action plan to work on. That's very good. I'm sure that will help a lot of people, especially given your where you started, where you said, I write books about topics where I think I have a perspective and I could help someone. In this day and age where we live, people are always looking for kind of the tips and traps and what can I do differently to deal with that. So I love that, and I'm looking forward to doing that. I think just to close off, and I don't know how I'm doing for time, but from a publishing and authorship perspective, you talked about the fact that you prefer to self-publish, and you explained it very well as to why you want the autonomy in terms of your own writing and your own voice. But I'm wondering for emerging authors, right? Someone being a first-time author, would you recommend for them to self-publish? And in a nutshell, that's kind of my observation, what I have to share there, Abutisem and Mbulelo. But congratulations and thank you for writing this book.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Beautiful. Yes, Mbulelo, let me give you some time to reflect a bit on what you have heard.
Let me start with the last question that Helen has asked as to whether would I recommend it for a new writer to do self-publishing. I don't think so. I think if you are a new writer, the thing is with me, I had the instruments, to enable me to do self-publishing. I have the drive. I have also the machinery in terms of and the know-how in terms of how to ensure that I self-publish successfully. But with new writers, I think it would be maybe important that they first go under a publishing company, and maybe then later on, self-publish after they have learned certain things. For instance, it was a trial and error in terms of what I've learned, right from the beginning when I decided that I was going to self-publish, including the possibilities in terms of then when you have your book at the bookstore, what are you likely to get? I mean, we know that for some bookstores, they take 50% of the sale of any book. And also, you would have printed the book, you would have done everything and spent money in terms of the book, but you would actually only get 50% of that sale of the book, which unfortunately, then meaning that you are selling the book at a loss. Because if the bookstore takes 50%, what about all the work that you have done in terms of printing and all that, and you only get 50%? So maybe out of a book that that costs 100 rands to actually get it to the bookstore and sell it, you get 2 rands, from that book, So these are things that I mean, right at the beginning when I was considering self-publishing, I thought about all those things because I did my research in terms of bookstores, and I had meetings, for instance, with bookstores in terms of how things work, and they told me. And when I finally decided that I was going to have my book in some of these bookstores, I knew as to why. For me, it was more having my books in those bookstores as business cards rather than looking at the fact that I was going to have profit from selling my books in those. It was more like business cards. A person or people will read my books and then book me for sessions where I can make money from then appearance in those sessions and then interacting with people. So it was more from that angle that I would then even think about having my book in bookstores rather than me saying I am going to make a killing by having my book in a bookstore. There are so many books in a bookstore, and you're not sure as to where they're going to put it in the first instance. They might put it right at the back, and your book is not safe. So that's the first part that I just wanted to address, that maybe when you're starting, just consider having a publisher who's going to fight all the battles for you, and then yes, you get that 2 rands at the end. It's okay. It's a learning curve. There are other aspects that you have spoken about in terms of HR, for instance, getting the book inside an organization and all this stuff. I think that HR, unfortunately, and one of the things that you have mentioned, which is very important, I actually liked what you said, that the positioning of HR within the organization determines as to what influence HR will have in terms of the people, especially managers and leaders within the organization. If you position well, it's easy to bring this book in terms of the organization. If you're positioned well, because they know that you want to add value, you want to ensure that at the end of the day, the organization delivers. But if you're just a paper pusher and you're just a post box HR, you will struggle to get the book in. But I think the positioning in terms of HR, I mean, there is an organization that I went to, a big organization right now, and it was as if the head of HR was trembling in terms of how she's going to bring this book inside the organization. And it pointed to this, what you've just said, Helen, the positioning of HR. Why was the person trembling? Because if the HR is positioned well, then HR should be able to direct in terms of saying that, listen, this is part of what we need to do to have a winning culture that is going to give us the results that we want as an organization. I think there are a number of things that you have mentioned, but I think for me, that stood out and said, the positioning of HR is important in terms of culture within an organization, because HR becomes either a colluder or an enabler or perhaps an instrument in terms of ensuring that the organization has the right culture. I know that we normally say that the CEO and maybe directors determine the culture of the organization, but HR has got a crucial role to play in terms of coaching those individuals within organizations. So that you also find in the book. So what I've just spoken about now, you will find in the book. I think it's one of the chapters towards the end as to what is the role of HR in terms of elimination of pit bullying within organization, and some of the traps that HR falls into that do not enable HR to eliminate pit bullying within an organization.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, colleagues. There's last comment there from Juliana, complimenting you, Helen, for great reflection there. Thank you so much, Juliana.
Maybe Sam, from my side, as closing, I want to also thank Juliana for introducing me to you. Juliana was, when I started consulting, I started with two clients. Juliana was one of the first clients that I had when I started consulting. And this is the person that has had my best interest since from day one. I don't know why. You know, when people say they are brought by God towards you, Juliana is one of them, because she always gets me into spaces that I did not think that I would be able to get into. So I want to thank you, Juliana, also for enabling me to be part of this session and introducing me to Sam.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We thank you, Juliana, doing very well. This is how we multiply ourselves, and this is how we grow our country, our profession, and the continent. I'm very passionate about showcasing authors, because it's really one area that I believe is a legacy for our children, for our country. And I'm so glad that we had both Juliana and Leonard, they are authors themselves, and I'm actually have a slot reserved for them. And then I think what I've learned today from this session is that perhaps it's a good thing to have just one author and spend the whole time on that author, because we need to know who you are, where have you been, what made you to decide to write, how you write, and how you deal with the business of writing. So I think this was a mini masterclass, if I may say. We might have to call you back to now focus on your approach to running the business of writing books and publishing and distributing books. Thank you very much for that, and I'm glad, and I hope we're not going to lose you to this network. We'll call you again whenever we need to deepen that. And I think let me give you the opportunity also to tell the viewers how they get a hold of you.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. And also, yes, you're not going to lose me to the network. I didn't know about its existence. Now that I know about its existence, I am going to be part of the network. People can get hold of me on my email. My email is simple. In fact, I have two emails. The first email is mayikana@netactive.co.za. Mayikana, just use my surname. Mayikana@netactive.co.za. Then the other email is info@mbulelo.co.za. Simple as that. info@mbulelo.co.za. But if it happens that you forget what I've just said now, in terms of my contact details, go to my website, mbulelo.co.za. You will get all my contact details on my website, mbulelo.co.za. If you want to send me a message, you can send me a message WhatsApp on 076 468 2443. I want to repeat again, 076 468 2443. And I'm a quick responder. I respond quickly. So use the two emails and also use this number to send me messages. And if you want to order the book, again, you can use the same contact details that I've given you. And if you want to order in bulk, maybe for your managers and your leaders within your organization, feel free. I'm quick in terms of delivering the books. So, and also in terms of having follow-up discussions with people within your organization, where we would explore various aspects in terms of the book, and also how those aspects can actually help create a winning culture for organizations.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Sister Helen, your closing remarks to our viewers, and how did they get a hold of you? I know you're fresh back. Those who know you before you left, they might be happily surprised that you're back. So maybe they want to touch base with you.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Abuti Seme, for having me on this live show. People can get hold of me on via email, which is Helen, and as you can see, my name has got double L, so HELLEN at Living Infinitely. So LIVINGINFINITELI.com, which is Living Infinitely, the name of my company. People can also get a hold of me on www.livinginfinitely.com. And of course, via WhatsApp on 083-327-6520. 083-327-6520. Thanks a lot.
Both of you are available on LinkedIn, I guess.
And
yes,
I'm available
yes.
on all social media, really.
Also, all social media platforms, I'm available as Mbulelo Mayikana.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Helen Lebone. Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Yeah, this is the platform. This is the COMETSA Tuesdays Live, brought to you by COMETSA Television Network, CTN. This is our video streaming platform. We meet every Tuesday, same time. And of course, if you want to be part of COMETSA ecosystem, the network, just go to our website, www.cometa-goc.com. Right at the bottom there, there's an icon, apply for membership. We have a membership with our NPO. That's how you become a guest and also a contributor to this lifelong learning platform. We'd love to have you, whether you're a coach, you're an author, mentor, consultant. We are basing our shows on the principle that I shared with you called the idea. We inform and entertain, develop and educate, empower and support, associate and network. That's the idea and that's the concept by which we conduct ourselves, and I hope we live up to that. We look forward to see you next week, Tuesday. Please don't miss it. It's a third Tuesday, and we will be talking executive coaching. The next week one is special as we are welcoming our friend Mzwandile Manto. He's also an Eastern Cape, I guess, Mbulelo.
Yeah.
He graduated from Vets Business School, Master of Management in Business and Executive Coaching. We have a practice here at COMETSA where we call it an incubation of freshly graduated executive coaches, not only graduated from academic, but also from professional bodies like COMETSA, Coaches and Mentors of South Africa, or International Coaching Federation. That's where we converge and that's where we make coaching real. We do work together, we do collaborate. COMETSA has got quite a good portfolio of highly qualified executive coaches that we love to deploy at our clients and also help to grow the profession. So it's in our interest that we have them with us. And of course, also in our interest to have many of you guys writing about coaching. We would love to have people writing about coaches coming to the platform and let's grow the profession. Thank you so much, colleagues. That was it. The mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. Let's welcome you. My name is Sam Tima, and goodbye. Colleagues, stay in the studio as I disconnect from our viewers. And of course, I must say thank you to Leonard and Juliana. Thank you so much, brother, sister. You've been wonderful. It felt like you were with us in the studio. We appreciate the contribution. We'll have you one day live as well. Goodbye.